Welcome to this episode of Actually Olympia, the podcast. I'm your host, Jay Burney, City Manager, and with me, as always, is my awesome co-host, Kellie Brossett, Director of Strategic Communications.
Hi, Jay.
Hi, Kellie. Welcome back.
Hey, it's good to be back, and this is fun. We're back on the horse, and we've got some really fun guests. So
We do have some fun guests. So I'm excited for today's podcast. We've got a couple of really great guests. We've got Paul Simmons, Director of Parks, Arts, and Recreation. We've got Paul Simmons, Director of Parks, Arts, and Recreation, and Sylvana Niehuser, the Director of Parks, Planning, and Maintenance. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Mouthful.
It is a mouthful. And you guys are going to talk a lot about all the exciting things going on in parks right now. But before we get there, one of the things that we do with all of our guests is talk about your origin story. So I like to think of all of our employees as these superheroes that are out serving the community. And as you know, every superhero has an origin story, kind of how they got their start, why this work is important to them, and why you're here doing what you do. So why don't you talk to us about your origin stories? And Sylvana, why don't you start?
All right. Thank you. My start with the city was a little different than some of my colleagues. After graduating college, Evergreen State College, go Gooey Ducks, I was looking for part-time work to balance my family needs, and I heard the city of Olympia was a good, stable employer, and I decided to apply. Didn't really have, the thought that, I'm going to definitely get this because there was hundreds of other people applying. So when I got the call back, I was very excited. And I started with the police department part-time. Really loved the group that I worked with, but I wanted to challenge myself. And so I went to legal for a little bit, did some work there in victim advocacy. And then the recession hit, and there was an opportunity to go out to parks maintenance full-time. And I went out there, and when I got into parks, I realized this is some really cool stuff.
Right.
I was like, this is fun, really fun. But I didn't want to be in the office per se at that time. I wanted to be out in the parks, and I wanted to work with the community in a way that, since I live here, I wanted to make it a better place. And so, I thought, what can I do? And so I started looking at programs that were happening throughout our city. And I just started applying for different program positions. And I got hired to create the stewardship program.
Yep.
Which includes our volunteers and as well as our environmental education and park ranger program. And that was exciting. And I met a lot of great people along the way. And once I got into that work, I decided I'm not leaving the field of Parks and Recreation. So I've worked my way up on the maintenance side of the house to where I'm at today.
One of my fondest memories of you are our first original park ranger.
Yeah, I was going to say,
right?
I had heard a rumor you were our first park ranger, Smokey the Bear.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I miss those days every now and then.
Yeah.
So I cling to the stories that they tell, because it's exciting. In the city, you wouldn't imagine some of the things that we encounter. And it's, just, I don't know, there's something new every day. And I really just love parks.
As well as a really nice hat.
That's true.
You did have a cool hat.
I did have this Smokey Bear hat.
Yeah.
I kind of have a funny story that I would like to share about that.
Let's share it.
Okay. So I thought when I got the hat that the strap was supposed to go under my chin.
Right.
So I was wearing it under my chin. And I would stop in and say hi to some of my colleagues that were over at the police department. And one of my favorite officers came up to me and was like, "What's up, Smokey Bear?" And I was like, "Oh, not much. You see my hat?" And I was really proud of it. So I was like, and he was like, "That's not a chin strap." I go, "It's not?" And he goes, "You ever see anybody wear it under their chin?" I was like, "Well, no, but I thought so, like when the wind blows, it wouldn't fly off."
Right.
And he laughed and he walked away. And so, of course, I had to figure out what the heck,
Right.
And so then I realized, it's supposed to go around the back of your head.
That is awesome.
But I wore it like that for a while. So, I do have to just own it,
I also think that's just bad engineering.
Right? Why put a strap there unless don't tell people how to use it?
Right.
Yeah. Does it still work on the back as well? Like, did it keep it on there okay? Because I'd be kind of worried that it would.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, as long as you're not wearing it up like this and you're wearing it, level. So.
Well, so there's a lot of park rangers out there in the world right now just learned something. So
Or they're laughing at me.
they're changing the world one hat at a time, right?
That's right.
Well, you laid an amazing foundation for what has become a really great program. We've got a really amazing set of park rangers now that, again, you showed them the way. And so I just want to thank you for kind of where you started. And, you talk about your journey about where you've been and kind of where you are. And you have done a lot of really cool things and kind of made your way up the ladder, and just really appreciate your journey to be where you are.
Thank you. It's
Yeah.
been a good one.
Yeah. Well, Paul, let's talk about you. So let's talk about your journey.
Yeah. So, I got to credit everything to my parents. So I grew up 2 older brothers, and they had us doing every activity: basketball, soccer, baseball, and they coached us all in every activity. My mom would coach, my dad would coach. My dad was a truck driver, and my mom stayed at home, so she would volunteer in our elementary school classrooms. And my dad would work, he'd do 3 days on, 2 days off. So on the days he was off, he would be in the classrooms. And just my parents were super engaged and super supportive and helped me kind of understand activities and kind of being out there. And they were great role models. And then when I was in 6th grade, we went to Camp Waskowitz, which was an outdoor education camp. And it was the first time outside of the home where I'd ever really experienced psychological safety. And everyone was working together as a team and supporting each other and lifting each other up, and lots of enthusiasm and pride for our cabin and all those sort of things. And I couldn't get enough of that feeling. And so I couldn't wait till high school to go back as a camp counselor.
Yep.
And they let you go once a semester. So I went every semester in high school. And then even I found out my senior year that I could get a bonus week. I used my spring break. I went up as a camp counselor because I just couldn't get enough of it. I also played water polo and did swim team, which led to my first job. Before I even knew I was going into Parks and Recreation, I was a lifeguard and swim instructor for King County Parks and Recreation.
Yep.
I started lifeguarding at 15, and then because of my experience at camp, was able to quickly become a swim instructor and start teaching swim lessons at a pretty young age. And then I saw a summer day camp position with Federal Way Parks and Recreation. I was like, ooh, that can be like what I was doing at Camp Waskowitz. And so I got a Federal Way Parks and Recreation day camp. And at the time, my whole goal was to go to college to become a 6th grade teacher so I could take my class back to camp. But after a year, of being at Central Washington University, go Wildcats.
Go Wildcats.
Go Wildcats. After a year of being there, I happened to stumble across the foundation of recreation class, and it took me about 10 minutes to realize, that I had these experiences. I didn't realize at the time that you could have a career in the parks and recreation industry, and that in fact there was actually a college degree called recreation management. And so I was all in right out the gate, and that kind of then set me on a path. But I was really lucky in that my part-time experience as a kid growing up happened to match what my passion is as an adult and where my career was going. So it kind of gave me a jump start and a head start in terms of getting some experience under my belt and working for a county and a city and some different places along the way.
Yeah, from Cheney to Olympia and everywhere in between, right?
Yeah.
Well, and Paul, when I was in high school, Camp Cispus around here, a lot of the kids, and I was a camp counselor at Cispus for a couple of years. And my claim to fame is when I was a junior, it was the first time I did it. And I told my kids all week that if they were good, then on the last week we'd have a pillow fight. And so here we are right in the middle of this big pillow fight, and in walks one of the teachers thinking that it's all broken loose, all heck's broken loose. Where is your counselor? Well, I'm in the middle of swinging a pillow, right? And despite that, they let me come back my senior year and do it again. But
That's great.
Good memories.
So I approach everything I do as with a camp counselor mentality. So you'll often see me getting excited about things.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate those stories from the two of you, and again, I think we're just been fortunate to have who we have. We have a lot of really amazing parks employees that are doing great work. So, again, thanks for being here. So, we're experiencing and have experiencing just a tremendous amount of growth in our park system, particularly over the last, 5 to 10 years in particular. Talk to us a bit about that growth and funding and parks planning and how community members play a role in all the work that has gotten us here to this point.
Yeah, I'll take this one if that's okay, Sylvana. I think this is a moment where we really need to acknowledge and express enormous gratitude to the voters of Olympia. Our park system has experienced tremendous progress, as you've said, over the last 8 to 9 years, and that is in large part because of not one, but 2 voted measures where the Olympia community has said, we love our parks, we want more parks, and we're willing to pay more money and more taxes so that we can have that. It started first in 2004 before I arrived with the voted utility tax, the Parks and Pathways ballot measure, which 1% goes to sidewalks and 2% goes to parks, arts, and recreation. And then once again in 2015, when the Olympia Metropolitan Park District was on the ballot, and the voters once again passed it with an overwhelming 60% voter approval. And those 2 ballot measures, along with the city's general fund contributions, has allowed the department really to make up for some really hard years during the recession, and then also set the course for the future so that we have a system that not only serves the community that we have today, but is also getting set up for the growing city that will be in the future as well.
So when people think, you think of a park, you think, there's just like this expanse of green grass and, a swing set and picnic tables. But the Olympia Park system is really much more diverse than that sort of classic idea of a park. Can you talk a little bit about the diversity of the system that, our voters have supported?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I'm so proud of our park system is because of the diversity. So, downtown, a lot of folks know about Percival Landing, getting to be right there over the water. It's a great space where a lot of community happens and events and celebrations. And I think, we've got boaters down there, we've got pedestrians, we've got people from out of town, we've got tourists and stuff. And so that I think is really unique. Not every downtown has access to the waterfront like that. So I really value that piece. And then we've got areas like Squaxin Park, where you have 314 acres, mostly wooded, but within there is nestled picnic shelters and a playground and lots of trails. And so, just having the diversity throughout our park system, there's something for everybody, is what we strive for, and to make sure that, we're listening to the community when they tell us what they want in their parks. And so, we've got dog parks, and we know our community loves dogs. So those were a new addition more recently. We've got 3 spray grounds that are free that operate in the summer for water play. There's a lot of different opportunities. We have a multimodal regional trail that connects us to Lacey, so you can ride your bike from Olympia to Lacey or up north to Woodard Bay. Or down south to Tenino, which is really cool.
Yeah, our system is one you can go get lost in the woods.
Right.
It just, not far from your house. You can go stroll along the beach. You can play in a softball tournament. You can take your kids to a variety of playgrounds, some that include things like zip lines, some that include, mini climbing walls, some that have giant slides that are 2 stories high. So we have tons of playgrounds. We have wildlife in our parks. Actually, this is a true story. I started November 18th, and I got an email that at Grass Lake, which is our second largest park on the west side, I got an email that somebody saw a Malamute chasing a mountain lion.
Lord.
in Grass Lake. This was one of the first emails I got when I started working here, and the first thing I said was, "Is this an Apple Cup joke?" Like,
Yeah.
because it was November 18th.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, well, the Huskies and Cougars like taunting each other a little bit, and are we sure the
Cue the
Cougar?
cougar. Yeah.
So, anyways, it was one of those things. So we've got vast wildlife, and there's just lots of opportunities for a lot of different types of recreational experiences. You can go be isolated and have a moment on your own, or you can go be part of a larger community and build bonds together with your neighbors. Just lots of opportunities.
Ice skate.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
we forgot about ice skating.
Yeah.
The
Nice.
pump track.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I mean, the great thing about our park system is there really is something for everybody, right? And our parks aren't just a place to recreate. They build economy. They're a place for people to build connection with each other. They're a place for people to build connection with nature. There's just so many healing properties, so many awesome things that come with having a robust park system. And for a city our size, we're very fortunate that, as you said, Paul, that our taxpayers have voted twice now to support parks. And that is really what has allowed us to have what we have and value what we have. So it's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Well, let's start to dig into some of those amazing things. So we've got some exciting things happening in parks right now. There's some big projects that are getting pretty close to becoming a reality. So let's start there and talk about those projects.
Yeah, so we have two transformative projects that will change the landscape of Olympia. One of them is what's currently the temporary name, Yelm Highway Community Park. It's actually in the process of getting a new name. One of the things, we talk about all the things that Olympia's park system has. Believe it or not, a city our size and age, we don't have a single soccer field in our entire park system. And this is something that the community has been asking for long before I got here. So probably for at least that I've seen at least 25 years, we've had community members saying we need soccer fields. We need, currently the way it works is if you have kids that play in what's called super mod, which I think is up to age 7-ish.
Is that pizza?
No. Super mod is like modified soccer for younger kids. So they play on the mini fields. So we can accommodate those with patches of grass here and there, softball outfields, other places. But once you hit age 8 and you're playing on a normal size soccer field, you're not playing in Olympia anymore, at least not on park property. You might be able to get into some of the school fields, but those are sometimes in pretty rough condition because the schools use them all day. Right. And then after the schools are done using them, then we try to go on and they're not always in the best shape. So a lot of times for age 7 and up, they may have their practices on patches of grass here and there, but once they get to the games, they have to drive to Tumwater or Lacey or even further to play some of those games. So forever, we've had our Olympia families driving outside of Olympia to play in these soccer games. So the hope is that Yelm Highway eventually at full build out will have 5 synthetic turf lit soccer fields. Phase 1, we're starting with 1. So unfortunately, the cost of getting a park off the ground, that first phase is always the most challenging. But over the next decade or two, we'll be adding more and more fields along the way. So Yelm Highway Park is more than just soccer fields, even though that's a big focus. We'll also have another dog park. We'll have 13 pickleball courts, including our first ADA pickleball court.
That's awesome.
And pickleball. We had
Our state sport.
Yeah.
We had an association meeting where we had people from all over the region that do what we do, and we asked about trends, and it's still like 5 years strong, all things pickleball. So we're excited to have a facility where we can host tournaments and help start to meet the demand that exists. We opened up 4 courts at Woodruff Park a few years ago, and they were immediately at capacity. We actually had to put up signs that said, please be courteous of others and share the courts. And because they're in such demand that people couldn't use them. And so
Please don't start before daylight, things like that.
Yeah. Right.
yeah. So anyway, I was getting off track a little bit. It'll also have 2 full-size basketball courts. So we have basketball hoops in our parks and half courts, but we don't have any full-size courts where people could run, the distance. And so we'll have 2 of those. We'll have a larger sized playground to meet we'll have a restroom, shelter. There will have a satellite maintenance facility at the park because as you may or may not know, our maintenance work out of Squaxin Park, which is in the northeast corner, and Yelm Highway Park will be in the southeast corner. So the satellite maintenance facility will help take some of our pressure off our outdated building and also allow us to have staff kind of more spaced around the city, which will create some efficiencies and less fuel and less time to get from here to there and that sort of thing. So that's the Yelm Highway Community Park. And then,
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, to the soccer community that's been so patient, we're so close. Like, we're so close to breaking ground, and that's going to be just a long time coming and a dream for a lot of soccer families to be able to play closer to home. Yeah. And boy, when we get to a day when we build out all of those fields, what an amazing day that's going to be, right, for us here locally.
When will the community be able to see something happening out on the
so if everything goes to plan, which doesn't always happen, but if everything goes to plan,
it can.
We would hopefully be out to bid at the end of this year and under construction first thing in 2026. So that's the tentative, optimistic schedule ahead of us. And Jay, I want to piggyback on what you were saying a little bit about the soccer community who's been patient and asking. We've literally had generations of soccer players come through begging for fields for decades, and we've had countless community design meetings and surveys, and they've shown up year after year after year and continue to advocate for stuff. We've had countless grant applications and just process after process. And I would think if I were a community member that didn't sit in my chair and didn't know what I know, I'd be asking myself, is this thing ever really going to happen? Like, how many more surveys I have to fill out?
It's coming.
And I think, to your point, I think we're as close as we've ever been, and I think it's about as real as it could be. So we're really excited to pass this forward.
Staff is intently working on design review. So with our plan sets, we usually review at 30% design, 60%, and then at 90%, you're pretty much done. So we are past the 30%, and we're excited because this part has just been moving forward with the engineered designs. And, we're getting to see it take shape on paper, and it's really close. And so we've been through a lot of hurdles, and so far we've been on track since we've gotten over those hurdles. So I'm optimistic that we'll be breaking ground in the early part of next year.
It makes me think of, like, what's the birth journey of a park? It's like it's like a germination, and there's a gestation, and then there's like, I'm just going to use plants, okay?
Yeah.
There's a bloom. So we've got like Yelm Community Park is about it bloom. Yeah. Is that sort of like what it feels like? That's sort of...
Yeah, it's a good analogy. One of the challenging things is no two parks have the same journey.
Right. Yeah.
So like a person, each park is unique. And so a park like Yelm Highway is what we refer to as a community park. When it's at full build out, it'll be a regional draw. So it's designed as such to be able to accommodate the entire community. Versus we may have some smaller parks, which are our neighborhood parks, which those are usually, 4 to 10 acres in size, and they're a smaller scale. So those may have a smaller journey. And then we have our open space parks, which at that point we're more looking at things like access, like parking and restrooms and bridges and, ADA access, and how do we accommodate some of those things. So each park, depending on the size, the scope, has a different timeline. But a typical process would be, say, Kelly, you have an idea. I want to have a spray ground at this park. When we receive that idea, we usually will put all the ideas on a list. And then every 6 years, in order to remain eligible for state grants, we have to update our Parks, Arts, and Recreation Plan, which is our 20-year vision. And that process usually lasts about a year and a half, where we go out to the community and we say, here's all the ideas that we've heard. And we have a series of neighborhood meetings and targeted outreach, and we do random sample surveys. And we ask the community, hey, it's been 6 years since we last talked to you. What's your vision for the future for the park system? Here's the resources we have. Here's the different things that we've heard from people. You tell us. And so through that process, process, then we will develop the new park plan, which includes the priorities. And then assuming your idea, Kelly, is vetted and supported by the broader community and the city council, then it ends up in the park plan. And once it's in the park plan, then we have to wait for whichever year it gets assigned, and it'll get allocated through the capital budget. Typically, we have to do what's called a feasibility or kind of a concept design where it's, like, for example, we did a feasibility study for an aquatic facility. There's 100 different types of swimming pools. How do we know what a feasibility study helps us narrow down to figure out what's the specific scope of a project that we want to have. So we'll do a feasibility or a concept study that usually involves public process and can take 1 to 2 years just to come up for that kind of initial phase. Once we have that, then we move into the design phase where we're taking the idea and we're actually starting to look at the 30%, 60%, 100% design. And we're starting to talk about details. Are we going to put a fence here? Where's the bench going to go? Is there going to be a shelter? What's the parking look like? Is there going to be a restroom? What are is the fence going to be blue, or is it going to be red, or is it going to be chain link, or what's this going to look like? What kind of surfacing are we going to have on the pathway? Is it going to be asphalt? Is it going to be gravel? So that's really, and what's hard is a lot of times when we do the concept planning, that's when people start asking the questions about the specifics. And that's one of the challenging things is until we get to the design, that's when we really start. So sometimes we'll hear feedback or we'll have questions about the design, and then we just have to kind of pull that information in to then reuse it once we get into the design. So the design phase, which also includes permitting, can also take anywhere from 1 to 3 years. And especially if you're in the shoreline area, there can be some tricky parts of the design and permitting phase that can really extend a process to an unknown period of time. The other thing that we usually learn during the design is we have what's called a pre-submission conference. And that's when we check in with all the other city departments, because there are things when we build a park, we get treated just like any other developer in the community, and we have to make sure that we're meeting all the standards and the codes.
Checking all the boxes.
And a lot of times, sometimes the frontage improvements, so the sidewalks and the infrastructure of the park, cost twice as much as the actual park amenities itself. And so really, I think that's one of the things too is once we have the design and we have firm cost estimates, then the next part is securing the funding. And that funding piece can happen through grants, it can happen through debt, it can happen through our voted measures. And then once we have funding secured and we have a good funding plan, viable funding plan for a project, then we move into construction. And then that can take another couple of years. So, we talk about our soccer players, generations and generations. We, at any given time, we have 8 to 10 park projects that are moving forward. And sometimes it's just an element of a park. It's not a full park design. And then other times, like in the case of Yelm Highway, it's an entire park design. And so there's lots of different examples, but hopefully that kind of gives an idea a little bit.
That's good. I mean, I think that most people get to see the finished product a lot of times when we do the ribbon cuttings, and we don't always recognize how long it takes to get from where it began as this nugget of an idea from a community member or a group of community members, and the path through a parks plan and through all the funding scenarios and through all the design and concept design and open houses and community conversations. And so by the time we get to a ribbon cutting, for example, on Yelm Highway, it's been on a journey, right? And it's been a fun journey along the way with getting that input along the way. And before you move on to Armory, I was thinking about pickleball. My wife's big dream is that when we retire, we're going to be the mixed doubles senior games pickleball champions. So I'm just going to put that challenge out in about 4 years from now to the pickleball community. The Bernies are coming.
Now the question is, are you going to be carrying her, or is she going to be carrying you?
No, she is very competitive. So I'm always worried that she's going to yell at me too if I don't do it right. So
practice a little.
So I'm going to have to bring my A game. Otherwise, she might look for a different partner.
Well, Jay, you may know we have wellness pickleball on Thursdays.
I was going to say, doesn't parks offer opportunities for
I have
staff
been to one of those wellness pickleball
skills?
events, and they ran me all over the court. No mercy.
That'll be good training for you.
No mercy.
That'll be good training for you.
Well, let's shift to the Armory.
Yeah. So the Armory is another one that the Arts Commission was created in the 90s. I think. Was it the 80s or
80s.
90s? I was 80s. And the program really took off in the 90s and 2000 with Arts Walk and some other things. And for years, and I think over 9 different city planning documents, there's been this call for an arts center. And I'll just be transparent and honest with you. Although my title is Parks, Arts, and Recreation Director, I came up on the recreation side of the house. So before I came to Olympia, I didn't have like a crazy strong arts background. But I remember going to Stephanie Johnson, our arts program manager, and said, I don't know a lot about arts, but let me know how I can support you. And so she's been a really good champion of the arts and has taught me a lot during my time here. But one of the things I've done as a director is I'll meet with employees one-on-one every 5 years or so. And I was doing my second round of one-on-one meetings, and I met with a former staff member that we had, Angel Nava. And I remember sitting down with Angel during the one-on-one meeting, and I was saying to her, if I were drawing a community center, I could, on the back of a napkin, design a community center in about 5 minutes. Right. And tell you, here's where you put the basketball courts. Here's indoor running track goes here, swimming pool over here, some meeting rooms, a nice lobby, some locker rooms. Like, I could do it in no time. But I had to look at Angel and very naively say, what happens at an arts center? I mean, I realize there's probably art. That makes a lot of sense. But beyond that, it was something that I was, even as the director of Parks, Arts, and Recreation, helped me understand this. And so after that meeting, she sent me a couple links of a couple really cool art centers, which were very impressive. And then the next thing I knew, I think it was her and Stephanie and Mary Grace arranged a tour. And Mike Reed, our economic development director, came along, and we went up to Seattle and we looked at the Youngstown Arts Center, which was an incredible model in West Seattle. It was an old school that had turned into, and then also the Pratt Art Center downtown, which was also equally awesome, but totally different. Right. So now I've got examples of all kinds of different art centers. So get me the napkin out. Let's go. And I was pretty excited. And then they ended up doing another trip down to Portland. I think I was sick for that one, and look at a couple examples down there. Meanwhile, we heard rumors that the National Guard was moving out of the Olympia Armory because they were building a new facility in Tumwater. And I think it was Mike was able to set up a tour for the same group of us. And so we went and walked through. And at this time, this is when we pulled Keith Staley, who was the assistant city manager at the time, and walked through the armory. And the next thing I knew, we were on a path to request the armory from the state. And I really have to give a big shout out to former Mayor Cheryl Selby and the council at the time, also former council member, now the state senator, and at the time state representative Jessica Bateman. The two of them were really instrumental working together to help us receive the armory. So we received the armory for free, mostly. I think we had to pay for the closing costs.
Mostly free.
Mostly free. And I say the word mostly free because while we didn't have to buy the building, it is a 1939 era's building that really is not up to code. And so now we're looking at how do we bring this building up to code so that we can use it safely. There's no elevators. It's not an accessible facility. Right. The restrooms are
we knew what we were taking on.
We did.
But it was too much of an amazing opportunity to not take it on.
It's just too cool to pass.
And we've had this dream to have an art center. And we've had this dream to have this art center for 3 decades now. And so here we go. We received the art center and we worked with Framework and we moved into the concept plan, and we had a whole bunch of community meetings. And this is when you can tell there's a lot of passion for a project. We would have meetings on Saturdays and we would put out 100 chairs. And 5 minutes before the meeting starts, we realized that we woefully underestimated the amount of people are going to show up, and we're scrambling to find more chairs because more and more people are coming. And we had a series of meetings, and you could just feel the energy and excitement from the neighborhood around the armory and the arts community and the folks that could kind of see this vision of what it could be. And so we went through a 2-year conceptual plan process. It's on Engage Olympia if people want to see that. And then we have been working with Amoresco with the state contract to do a kind of a final design on what a phase 1 would look like. And unfortunately, because the costs are so high, phase 1 is really focused on bringing the building up to code. So how do we get the life safety stuff, the sprinkler systems, the ADA accessibility, working plumbing pipes, gender-friendly restrooms. And so when we get phase 1 done, we'll be able to use the facility. Right now, when we use it in its current state, we have to have a special authorization from our building inspector. We have to put together a whole series of safety plans because the building doesn't meet code. And so there's a lot of limitations on how we use it. And if we can get this phase 1 done, we'll be able to use it to its full potential. So, I talk about Yelm Highway and the Armory. Both of these projects were called out on the ballot measure of the 2004 voted utility tax. So these are, when I say we've been working on these things for decades, they go way back. They were also both part of the 2015 ballot measure for the Metropolitan Park District. So these projects are pretty expensive, but they're transformational, and they are making good on promises that, campaign promises that have been part of our history for a long time. So we're really excited to be at this point.
And we're making space for some anchor partners. So a lot of our nonprofits in our community are going to benefit from getting some space at the Armory, and space they don't really have right now.
Absolutely. We'll have 8 anchor nonprofits that will help us bring the Armory to life. So it won't be just the city coming in there doing programs. We'll have various different nonprofits like The Bridge and Capital City Pride and TC Media, Capital City Press. I don't have a list in front of me, so I'm probably going to miss a couple of them.
Yeah,
but that's not. But they're all awesome.
They're all awesome.
Wonderful.
And what's cool is it's not cool right now, but it will be cool when they're at the Armory. Is right now they're spread out all over town.
They are.
When you can get them in the same building, the support that they and the synergy between the different nonprofits, it's going to be a beautiful thing. And then just the expanded services when you connect, I think about the Bridge Music Project, and you connect them with something like TC Media, or Capital City Print, or you look at how the nonprofits could support each other. I think some of them are really struggling with market rate rent. Some of them are in subpar facilities.
Yeah.
They're being forced to move every other year. And so this will be a chance to also give them some stability and some synergy, and then some support as we all kind of work together to bring that space to life.
Let them put their roots down and really grow, right? Really to your analogy, Kelly, right? This opportunity to really grow. And I think it's going to be really fun to watch that group even grow out of those spaces in the future, right? Into even bigger spaces. And we'll get to look back on that, later and say it all started here, right? And then creates other opportunities for others potentially in the future too. So really great project, and a couple of really cool projects that hopefully we're going to see some ribbon cuttings and some groundbreakings coming in the near future. So let's shift to some other coming attractions. So we got a couple big projects, but what are some other projects that, in the next coming years our community can look forward to?
Gestation? What's in gestation right now?
Well, we have been working on the west side on Kaiser Woods, and Kaiser Woods is going to be hiking and biking trails, which is definitely unique for Olympia because we don't have very many biking trails, and most of our biking trails are paved. So it's a different kind of biking. This is mountain biking, and so this will be exciting. And so we've been working on the design, and we've been working with a really great group who specializes in mountain bike trails.
Is it Evergreen Mountain Bike Alliance?
Evergreen Mountain Bike Alliance, and they've been amazing, and they've been sticking with us through the years because this one's taken a while.
Right.
It's got some unique features. One of the things that's become a challenge is actually the geology. It's got basalt underneath.
Okay.
So getting
things you learn.
Yes, yeah. So we've been working on modifying our stormwater design to make sure that we're managing our stormwater.
Like a little volcanic rock to lighten things up.
I'll add one more shout out too for the mountain bike community. This park is modeled after Swan Creek Mountain Bike Park, which is up in Tacoma, and so that was a park that we went and looked at in the early days of the design, which Evergreen Mountain Bike Park Alliance worked with too. And so if people want kind of a frame of reference of the type of facility that we're looking to, for those people that don't mountain bike, it's kind of similar to a ski slope where you'll have your green circle as your easier runs, and then you have your blue square where it gets a little more challenging, and then you better be pretty serious if you're going to go down the Black Diamond
I won't be doing that one.
So this will be the same thing, but this one's really focused on entry level mountain biking, and so most of the trails are your intermediate and beginner level.
Yeah, and then there'll also be like a skills area. So for folks that are wanting to develop skills, there'll be that piece. There's going to be on the uphill side, there will be hiking trails as well, so that, to avoid any conflict. And so, yeah, that one's coming. Or it's going through design and permitting. And so the next phase after that is construction. So that's very exciting. And then something that we have under construction right now that has been in the works since 1998,
Wow.
when it was first put into the park's plan. It's the Grass Lake Nature
Yeah.
Trail. And it's a multimodal trail, similar to how we have the Karen Fraser Woodland Trail on the east side of Olympia. We're going to have a connection between Kaiser and Harrison. And it's amazing. We were out there, actually, was it last week? And touring with some other jurisdictions who are very interested in our project. And there's a wetland crossing where we have used this low impact design that's very cutting edge and very cool. And we also created a 3,000 square foot wetland out there in another area of the park. And then we've got this trail, but instead of it being like a straight flat trail, it meanders through the forest a little bit in some areas. And it's going to be accessible. But it's just amazing because, this was thought of having a trail in this park and this connection to nature back in the late 90s. And we went for grants a few times and were successful. And, but it took a while to get this one through the permitting phases as well, because, there's some protected areas that we need to steward those and be mindful of and, do what's right and follow the code. And so, it's challenged us, but it's right on the cusp of being ready for the public. So I'm very excited about it.
Couple months.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and a couple things about it too is right now it's our second largest park. So I think it's 214 acres in total. Might be off a little bit there, but it's pretty close.
Plus or minus.
It's close enough. Somebody challenged me on that.
Plus or
anyways,
minus.
I'll be going out with my measuring stick.
Yeah.
But for this whole 214 acres, I think there's 3 parking spots currently.
Yeah.
And there has been
Wow.
historically, and they're not paved.
And we're building
And
some
they're
parking
on
out
the
there right
edge of
now.
a busy road where the people fly by. It's not the safest thing. So we
I
have
live out there.
challenging access to this beautiful property that has tons of biodiversity. And what will happen is we'll have a new accessible parking lot. It's big enough that you'll be able to drive a school bus through the parking lot. So for
That's awesome.
any local schools, if they want to do, we have a middle school and an elementary school that are on the other side of the park. So they could do a field trip where they could drop off at the trailhead and then walk about a mile back to their school. So there's some incredible environmental education opportunities
cool.
there. And then also this boardwalk, what it does is it opens up the whole back half of the property, because currently where those 3 parking spots are, because of the wetland, there's a beautiful loop trail there, but you can only get to about a third of the property. And so this is going to open up a lot of possibilities in terms of access to the park.
Yeah, and it'll
Exciting.
also, it'll serve eventually, the vision of the community is to have a capital to Capitol trail going from Capitol Forest to the Capitol Mall.
Yeah.
And, this piece is so critical in being able to connect up with the Ralph Monroe Trail and just really provide a lot more access and exploration. So.
Yeah. Awesome.
We also have Rebecca Howard Park.
Yes.
Is another idea. Kelly is actually the idea behind this one.
Yeah.
We'll give her a little credit there. And so Rebecca Howard Park is a new park behind the library on 9th and Adams Street. It's the former Fertile Ground site. And the idea here is to design a park that celebrates the accomplishments and contributions of our Black and African American Olympia area pioneers, which Rebecca Howard is one of our more famous ones, which is why the park is named Rebecca Howard Park. And so we are in the conceptual design phases and starting to move out of concepts into a little bit more design as the area we're in. But that's another project that we're really excited about and has had some progress over the last few years. It's not moving quite as quickly as some in the community had hoped and we hope, but we're getting there. And I'm really proud of where we are with that
too.
project. And I'm really proud of the team that we have that has helped us get to where we are. And I'm excited to see where that one's going to go.
Yeah, and it's actually moved a lot faster than a lot of these projects that you've talked about. I mean, there is this. You talked about generations and generations of soccer players. I think there are generations and generations of staff too who move a project. Everybody gets a little piece of it, and I think, clearly the Rebecca Howard Park has moved with a little more urgency. I think that's fair to say, though. You know. It's hard to snap your fingers and do it, but I think you guys have. I think there's a lot to be proud of the work the staff has done around that.
And if you move too quickly on a project like this that is very intentionally focused on, a particular, we have a focus about telling stories, right? And telling stories of, our Black community and our Black pioneers. And I feel like if you move something like that too fast, you have an opportunity, or you have more of a chance of getting it wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
I think
We don't wanna do that.
And so for us, we haven't done a park like this before. Our community has Yashiro Japanese Garden, but neither of us were in parks or a part of that. And so having a park really focused on a particular culture and history that isn't as prominent in the, getting the histories of some of these pioneers has been amazing to uncover.
Yeah.
And so I think taking time to make sure that you're getting the stories, and you're getting the stories correctly, and not just from one mainstream point of view, is really important, because we don't want to just be transactional with this park.
Yep.
Right.
It's meant to be transformative for our community.
We also don't want to leave any important stories out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Or any bone out that needs to be recognized. So I think it is really important that we sometimes go slow to go fast.
Yeah.
I know that can be hard for the community sometimes because they just want to see things move. But I think we do always do our best work when we're thoughtful and we take the time to make sure we do it right.
Absolutely. And it seems like that's sort of the ongoing balance with parks.
Yeah.
The managing and balancing the enthusiasm and desire of the community with the work of doing it well.
Absolutely.
We have two other things I want to highlight, and then you may have some other things too. But thanks to the voters and the Metropolitan Park District, we've been able to invest money each year into the existing system that's already there.
Yeah.
It's a program we call CAMP, which is our asset management program, our capital asset management program. And it's basically allowing us to rebuild our park system from the inside out. And so each year we have a prioritization where, depending on the condition, it'll get a score, and the level of risk, it'll get a score. And then we take that data, we inspect a third of our park system every year, and then we develop a prioritization list. And then each year we invest $750,000 into the camp program. And we've been doing that now for 9 years. It's allowed us to replace playgrounds, bathrooms, tennis courts.
It's awesome.
And then what we're seeing right now is ball field renovations. A lot of, before the MPD passed, the ball field lights and the dugouts and all those things were the original 70s, 80s era type facilities. And so it's pretty amazing. Was it 70s or 80s?
80s. 80s. Not 70s, 80s.
90s?
Yeah, and 90s maybe a little bit.
There you go.
Yeah.
Remember, he's in charge. There you go.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
better watch yourself.
He doesn't care. Yeah.
But what's exciting though is with this funding, we've been able to make a lot of progress and headway.
Yeah.
And you'll see trail bridges that are being fixed. And so these are all the things, it's fun to talk about all the new exciting stuff.
Yeah.
These are the things that people maybe, when it's broken, they aren't happy.
That's right.
But when it's working, they don't really realize
right.
what goes into make it working and keep it safe and accessible. We've also had our ADA plan where we did an ADA assessment back in 2017. And basically we looked at what would it take to bring every park up to code, because many of our parks were built before ADA standards existed. And so we had a $4 million backlog, and thanks to the money that we've allocated from the MPD each year, we've knocked out half of that list. And so We're close to half of that list, I should say. We're on track to be at halfway at the end of this year or the end of next year. So we're really excited about the progress we've made with Camp and ADA. And then as we look to the future, another project that's on the horizon, and we're not quite ready to go out to the larger public yet. We're still getting our ducks in a row, as the Olympia waterfront Percival Landing is an aged facility. We were able to rebuild part of it back in 2010, 2011. But we've learned a lot about sea level rise since then and before that. And so what we know now is that we can't rebuild Percival Landing like it is today. And so we need to think differently about this. And so we have a consultant under contract, and we're doing some work to revision what would it look like to have a different kind of waterfront that still has that same access to the water, but maybe looks different, and also protects downtown against sea level rise. Because as you know, one of our 4 vulnerability areas identified for downtown is the entirety of Percival Landing. And so this is some exciting visioning work this isn't going to be a project that's going to happen overnight. This is going to be another one that somebody will probably be sitting here in 2 decades looking back saying, remember when they started this back in 2025?
Probably so.
This could be one of those projects. And so I just wanted to give just kind of a shout out, because we can't just focus on like what's happening right now. We not only have to look back, but we also have to, and we can't just look at what's in front of us, but we have to look ahead too. And that's a project that represents that.
Yeah.
And would transform how downtown looks, how the waterfront looks.
And we're not looking at just engineering a solution for sea level rise. We're looking at having our streets being like transformative. So, a promenade was thrown out there.
I've seen some early drawings.
Yeah.
They look
Awesomeness. It gets me excited thinking about what could this downtown waterfront be. And, I think it's going to be big. Economically, it's going to have a positive impact. And I think that we really, when we get through the visioning and see the connections that it creates as well to other exciting projects going on.
Like the estuary.
Like the Deschutes Estuary.
Yeah,
that's going to be exciting. I do have one project that is near and dear to my heart that I wanted to
let's
share.
talk about it.
Yeah, so it's a smaller scale project, but really big in impact. And this is the all-inclusive playscape that we're thinking through how we're going to put this all together. So we're still real internal with it. And it's for Squaxin Park. So we have a playground that's beyond its useful life and needing replacement. And we have an opportunity there with the meadow to just expand into a playscape. So we're not thinking about playground anymore, but we're thinking about how do we transform that whole area
So everyone can play there.
for everyone. And we want integrated play.
Yeah.
Kids of all abilities, whether you have a visible or invisible situation. We want kids, who have sensory, needs to be able to find, joy and play with other kids. And that's, to me, how you create appreciation, you create community. And so Sarah Giannoble's been working on doing a lot of research and taking some classes. She's one of our associate planners on all-inclusive playscapes. And I've also done some work on this too. And we're really excited. We want to get started later this year or next year on starting to bring together some steering committee or stakeholder groups. Particularly would love to work with like parent to parent and talk to the folks that this playground's going to be for. And if it's for, a child that has a disability, it's for everybody.
Yeah.
So, and that's how we want to think of this space. So it's exciting. We also have an opportunity to highlight the Squaxin Island tribe culture. So that is something we've been thinking a lot about because we know Squaxin Park is very important to the tribe's culture. So and history.
I was just going to say this fits really well into, Paul, your belonging work, right?
Yes.
You guys have spent a lot of time working on belonging. Maybe talk about that just for a minute and kind of the investment of time there
Yeah.
and why that's so important.
So in 2021, we launched at the start of 2021, we launched our Equity, Inclusion, Belonging Initiative, which is really, it's a cross-section or cross-department group of staff where we have staff from all levels represented, frontline staff, field staff, planning staff, managers, and we bring people together and we talk about belonging. And we look at it really in three different levels. There's when we look at how we serve the community and the parks we provide and the programs we provide, and are we creating that sense of belonging where we're attracting people of all demographics, and helping people find their sense of belonging regardless of what their background is in our park system and at our programs. Right. So that's one area that we look at. And then we also look at what is it like to be a member of our staff team, and what's the culture of the staff, and what are our hiring practices look like? What does our onboarding look like? What are our policies? How do we show up in our team meetings, and all of those elements? And then we also are looking at it from ourselves internally. What training opportunities do we want to provide for our staff? Because each one of us have a different level of understanding based on our own life experiences. And so how do we help staff continue to grow in this so that there's more meaningful understanding and a bigger sense? And so this work is really important to us. It's led to, I think it was a part of how we looked at changing the name to Squaxin Park from Priest Point Park as a part of this. Yep. The naming of Rebecca Howard and that whole project, our cultural event series. We did a Black History Month celebration yesterday. Yep. We have Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander event coming up in May. There's a Juneteenth event in June. We have Lula Fest for Hispanic Heritage in September, and then Indigenous Peoples Day in October. So we have a full series of events, and we're really proud of the work and what we've accomplished. The one thing I'll say back to the inclusive playground, though, and Sylvana said, kind of smaller scale going in, and I'd say it's going to be hard because we have these big projects like the Armory and Yelm Highway, and even Rebecca Howard. As those projects move on, it's going to make resources a little bit tighter. And I would just encourage you to not go small on the inclusive playground, because I think that's one, if you're going to invest more money in,
100% agree.
The impact there is so massive. And I've seen some really incredible, there's some examples in Vancouver and Portland. They refer to them as radically inclusive playgrounds. And Harper's Playground is a organization that we've been having some early conversations with from a designs resource and sort of thing.
They help governments get through the planning differently and just taking a different approach to design and whatnot. And so that organization has been really helpful.
Yeah. I think about, when you're talking about it, my mind goes to like, what happens on a playground? I mean, it's where you make your first friends, right?
Yeah.
And you can only make friends with the people who can be there.
Yeah.
Our parks, or all of our public spaces, should be spaces that everyone feels is comfortable for them. Right. And they can see themselves there. They can experience them like everyone else can, and that we're paying attention to those things. And so I just really want to express my appreciation for the work, because I do agree with you, Paul, that because you have been very intentional about it, we're starting to see that shift happen in different ways, and the thought process are changing in different ways. And so it's what it takes. It takes leadership to get us to that place, right? Absolutely. Which kind of shifts me to my next point of conversation, Paul, with you, is you've really worked hard to build an amazing culture in the Parks Department, throughout the department and with your employees. And that shows up in just so many amazing ways. I mean, a lot of the conversations we've just had here today, shows kind of how that shows up. But talk about that for a minute. Why is it really important, the work that you've done around building culture in your department, and what your hope for the future is?
Yeah, to be honest, I think I'm the least important person in the department. I honestly believe that wholeheartedly. The work of what we do starts on the front lines. And when you look at our customer service folks at the front desk, or our rovers who are opening and closing the restrooms, and the people that are interacting with the public and creating the experience that we want the people to have, that's the staff. as I said, I came up on the recreation side. I didn't know a lot about arts when I got here. I didn't know a lot about park planning when I got here. And really, we have an incredible team of folks up and down the organization that are truly experts at what they do. And not only are they experts and do they have like incredible technical knowledge, but they have a really unique passion for serving the community. And I think I don't know if it's something about our area or what it is, but there's a draw because, when we look at our projects and the things we're working on, there's something truly special about what's happening at Olympia Parks and Recreation. And I think that pulls a certain type of person in. And those are the people that really find success with the department. And I also, I attribute this back to the voters a little bit. I've been in communities that didn't pass ballot measures. Yeah. And it's harder to retain staff, and they're not seeing the progress that we're seeing here. Right. So I think we have a community that loves its parks. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, and we have a council and a leadership team that's supportive of the work we do, and when all of that aligns, it's really easy to create a culture where people can thrive. And and that's, I think, what we're seeing here, which is awesome.
Paul, that is leadership, right? Leadership is understanding that one individual at the top cannot set culture, right? You can provide a framework, and then you allow the employees to grow and thrive within it. And that's what this looks like. And so, your humbleness in that answer is something I really appreciate, but it's exactly why I brought it up, right? Because that's just who you are, and allowing people around you to kind of grow in their roles and is really important.
I'd like to say, as somebody who's worked for Paul the entire time that he's been here, is that, you go back to your plant analogy, and a plant's not just going to grow without water, without nutrients. And so when I think about our department as a bunch of diverse plants, I think of Paul as the one that is there watching, watering, nurturing the talents of the staff and believing in the staff. And so having that support gives you that freedom to be innovative, creative, do your best work, want to show up. So I've had the opportunity to be mentored by Paul and others within our department too, because there's a culture of this mentoring. I mean, we've got a guest with us today, because Paul is just, that's who he is, He wants to better the organization, the staff, and cares about them. And so I think seeing that, coming from the top leadership on down is what really motivates and get staff to wanting to be their best. Yeah. And so I think it attracts good people who are motivated as well, because this train moves fast sometimes, even though on the outside it might seem like it's really slow. Like we got so many balls up in the air right now.
There's a lot happening.
A lot going on inside.
Well,
but it's exciting.
We've been talking for over an hour, right? And that just tells you how much is really going on. And just you mentioned it, but just a little shout out to Levi Jennings, who's sitting over there off camera. You can't see him, but Sylvana, you mentioned Paul's got a rec program major that is shadowing him today. And that just really speaks to what you said about Paul, your willingness to be open to getting others started in the career. And so just, grateful for the thing you do there. But let's keep talking about Paul for a minute, because
Do we have to?
I know he loves that.
Yeah, look, his ears are turning red.
But for those of you that don't know, Paul is leaving us in about a week. Paul's spreading his wings and moving on to a different adventure in a different organization. And Paul, man, this is a hard one for me. I got to tell you that it has been a highlight of my career to work alongside you for the past 12 years, right? I mean, on top of the foundation that you've laid in the growth of our park system, you really have been an amazing leader, in this organization. You're always so positive, with such a passion for your profession. And that just shows in every interaction, in everything that you do. And it's going to be tough to imagine this place without you, and not here. So as you get ready to leave, I'd love to know, what are you most proud of? And what do you hope when people look back in the Paul Simmons era of parks that you hope your legacy is that you're leaving?
Yeah, that's a tough question, and I gotta say it's also it's really hard to go too. It's with mixed emotions that I take this next step. You talked about our origin story initially, and I didn't share the personal side of how I got here, which was my now wife and I had a distance relationship back in 2013, and she was living in Seattle and I was living in Eastern Washington, and we drove back and forth for a year, and she was applying for jobs in Spokane, and this job in Olympia opened up. I didn't think I stood a chance in getting it, but applied for it anyways. I remember telling her that's probably out of my league, but I'll go for it anyways. And so I applied for the job and somehow got the job. And
Not somehow.
Yeah.
and her and I,
Yeah.
and her and I were able to start our life here. And so Olympia is a really special place for me because this is where my family began. We bought a house in Olympia, and we were married at the Harbor House just a few months after starting to work here, and had our first child about 10 months after that. And and now we have a family of 2, and this is the only place my kids have ever known. And so they've grown up in this community with our park system. They've been to a number of ribbon cuttings.
Yep.
And
awesome.
they participate in our summer camps, and they do during COVID, they participated in the day camp that happened. And so our kids are entrenched in this community, and this will always be home. While I'm taking another job, I'm not moving, so you might have to still put up with my kids in the camp programs, and you might see me from time to time at public comment.
Yeah.
Probably not, but maybe.
I think I'd
You
like
never
to
know.
see that.
Never say never.
Paul at the podium.
Never say never.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you guys ever want to start talking swimming pool, let me know. Maybe I'll show up at that point.
Right.
Anyways, no, Olympia is a real special place. I think for me, when I look back on my time here, I think a couple of things. One, I don't like to focus on me. I don't know if that's known. I really, the team that's here and the legacy, not only now currently, but the one that I inherited when I started here, we've had some incredible people work in this organization. And the work that happened before me laid the foundation for when I arrived. And I hope that the work that we've done over the last decade will leave an even better foundation for the next person who succeeds me in my role. And I think if we keep that nucleus of folks together, that, great things are ahead. When I think about so the team is probably the one big thing. The other thing too, and I'll never forget, when I first got here, one of the first Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee meetings I went to, a group of people rolled in and said, you need to save the LBA woods.
Oh, yeah.
And for those that lived here in 2014, 15, and 16, there was a pretty strong campaign to save the
remember
LBA
it well.
woods.
Yeah.
And so having negotiated the purchase and sale agreements on those properties, that's something that I'll never forget and always be proud of, is the fact that we were able to acquire and save the LBA woods. Actually, just as I'm kind of like reflecting on things, my wife and I took our dog through the walk. We have a new off-leash dog trail. I don't know if people know that, but it's not an off-leash dog park. It's like a trail. So if you want to have a hiking experience with your dog off-leash, we have a certain area of the park that's been designated. So we went and did a walk through the woods, and just kind of thinking back on where we were and how the LBA woods worked into the Metropolitan Park District, and how all these projects have now really came to life because of the Park District. But I don't know if the Park District would have existed if the LBA Woods folks weren't championing it, and the other park advocates
there's a lot of truth
in
to
the
that.
time. So I'm really proud of not only the LBA Woods, but then what that also grew into and where we're at today. And then the last thing is the spray grounds. I'm really excited about the spray grounds. So those were something when I was in Cheney, I was trying really hard to get one, and we really just couldn't afford it over there. And then I came here and I was like, we're going to figure this out. And we wrote some grants. The fountain was already here, so I can't take credit for that one, but we might have put push the other two. And
Yeah.
those are,
Kept the
those are pretty.
It
those are-
actually
that's
took
true.
pressure off the fountain.
took pressure off the fountain.
Because-
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the spray grounds are something, actually, not a lot of people know this, but when we were doing that first round of park plan updates, I actually sent my wife to one of the neighborhood meetings and I was like, bring the baby and talk about spray grounds. And that was, it was literally that type of
Inside
grassroots.
job.
It was that
Yeah.
type of grassroots advocacy. And,
Yeah.
you know, I don't
That's
talk
what you
about
call that.
I don't
That's
talk
what you
about
call
that
that.
a
That's how you
lot.
get stuff done.
But I think people are pretty happy with the spray grounds.
Yeah.
these days.
Yeah.
So it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are
It worked.
popular.
Yeah.
They are popular.
Yeah, yeah.
My most common phone call was when are you turning them on? Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because sometimes that early sunny weather happens
Yeah.
right before we're ready to turn them on, and people are anxious to get into them. Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Yeah.
We'll keep
Well-
the same season, but if we get some hot weather in May,
Well, you know where the
Yeah.
switch is?
I might know where the button is.
yeah, turn it on. Yeah. Right.
Great. Well, I'd like to echo what Jay said. You know, you're one of my favorites. You know that. I'm going to miss you so
Feelings
much.
mutual.
I know. We will continue our treat yourself breakfasts. we do that.
That's the thing.
I believe you.
But I just like, of course, where you're going, you might want to talk a little bit about where you're going. They are so incredibly lucky. So incredibly lucky. I think with your skills and your passion and your kindness, and your ability to see people, I think it's just such a benefit.
Yeah.
And I'll miss that.
Thank you.
You know, we all as leaders want to leave the place better than we found it. And you are certainly doing that, Paul. We are certainly better off with you as our parks director. And you have laid a great foundation for who comes after you, right? I think whoever comes in, fills in as our parks director next, is really going to say, wow, this place is in a great spot and they're ready to take it further, right? So I just, as we close out, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you've done for this community, all that you've done for me, for employees. You've meant a lot to so many, and you've brought your whole self to this community the time you were here, right? No one can ever say anything different than that. And I know you'll bring your whole self to your new journey as well. And as Kellie said, they're fortunate to have you. But Paul, just thank you for your time here at the City of Olympia and your time with me. And yeah, I'm going to miss you and I love you. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate our friendship that we've developed over the years, and your support and leadership, Jay. I couldn't do what I do if you didn't do what you do, and just everything all the guidance I've received from you over the years. Because, I say this, I've said this my whole time here. When I walk out of that city manager's office, is the lowest stress point of my week, and that's because of your leadership. And so part of what allows me to do what I do is because I'm empowered by folks like yourself, and I have good guidance and good teams all around me and within the department and above. So thank you very much. And also thanks for this opportunity today. It's really cool to highlight all the work we've been doing and get a chance to profile the great work of the staff and what the department's been up to. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'll have Parks back here before too much longer. There's more to talk about, and so we've got 12 months of the year to fill, and for the next 4 or 5 years.
to do this every month.
So we'll be back. We'll be back. But thanks again. I want to thank our guests, Paul and Sylvana. That's kind of it for this episode. So thank you both for being here. And Kellie, thanks as always for you continuing your journey with me on this podcast adventure.
It's always a ride.
Yeah.
It's always a ride. So I want to thank the community for listening. And I also want to remind you where you can find this podcast, which is everywhere you get a podcast.
Everywhere.
So don't forget to like and subscribe. Like us. Please say you like us. You can also see video versions of this podcast on Oli TV 3, and you can download the Oli TV app. I say this all the time. It's really good. So we will have a special guest.
Very special guest next month. Not going to spoil it.
We won't spoil it with sharing that information, but we'll be back with someone that you'll enjoy.
With someone
that you'll enjoy. And we're still looking for your questions. We do not have a mailbag to dip into right now, but we encourage you. Big questions, small questions, We will take them all. OlyTV at ci.olympia.wa.us. Lots of dots in there. Don't forget them. All right.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. That's it for this show, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Bye.